there's quite a bit of like hooks on this album that are sprinkled in through just the skate punk, pretty much assault that this album is, all the way through.
June 1st, 1999, we got Pennywise, Straight Ahead. I'm going to let you take the lead on this one, man, because this is your favorite Pennywise album, and I love this record too, so we got plenty to talk about.
Yeah, so we're here, 1999. As I always say, it is just, and it's not the thing is about Pennywise. We've talked about this a lot. We even talked about this last week. We can say that they're either redundant, they're consistent, they have a lot of the same, and you and I have argued, somewhat against that point as a negative and against that point generally when you listen to their music. I will say though, like when we did our album rankings, it was very hard to do Pennywise because Pennywise has actually quite a bit of quality on a lot of their albums. They don't have a down album. There's not that one, even the album with the other singer we kind of have put to the side because it was a little bit different, but they don't really have like a what were they thinking kind of album, and everything is pretty good. And there's always like a couple of hits or live staples that kind of come out of every one of their albums. So Straight Ahead is my number one, just slightly over About Time and Land of the Free. And for me, again, it really is splitting hairs, but the way I look at it, Pennywise's Straight Ahead is kind of like the Pennywise set. I like to think of it as like what are like all the huge Pennywise songs. Now, Bro Him and Fuck Authority are probably their two most iconic songs, and neither one of those are on this album.
Isn't that weird how that happens though?
Yeah, but pretty much everything else that you think of by the band, or a lot of what you think of, Greed, My Own Country, Can't Believe It, Victim of Reality, Straight Ahead, In My Own Way, Alien, those are staples of a Pennywise live set, of any Pennywise fans. Like that is really, you could almost convince me that this was like the greatest hits of Pennywise, and I would have kind of believed you because it has so many of the songs that are really just
hits.
A big, they're part of like the culture of the band. That's why I was saying I was going around all angsty because this album is a very sing-along type of album, and the band has a lot of these sing-along type of things. But Straight Ahead has like this really sweet spot that I think they started really hitting in the late 90s and early 2000s, where some of the earlier Pennywise, it was Jim putting in a lot of vocal words into these verses that were going really, really fast. And he does a pretty good job of it. But here the vocals in some sense is a little bit simpler in certain spots. And it's not that like he doesn't have the same bite that it did, but it's him getting in a little bit lesser words. So I think there's quite a bit of like hooks on this album that are sprinkled in through just the skate punk, pretty much assault that this album is. All the way through. Late in the album, there's a few spots where the rhythm gets a little bit slower, and there's a few more like drony songs, and then Alien, which was the song that had the video and like the big song that came out of it, that's a slower one. But most of this album is at a pretty brisk skate punky kind of in your face pace with bridges and breakdowns, usually like 3/4 of the way through the song, and that was kind of the formula on this one. But it, like I can close my eyes and listen to this album, and you just see like surfers and skaters and half pipes, and it just
real though
feels like that. Like it feels like maybe the best version of that kind of stuff.
Yes. So my thoughts real quick on that are, I think I might have said that this was my favorite sound album as far as what they've done. It's not my favorite Pennywise album, but the way this one sounds is better than all their other albums to me. I think this is the perfect skate punk, like sonically. I don't think you can make it better than this album. I mean, I think out of the whole record, let me pull up my Spotify. There's only like one or two songs that aren't songs that I absolutely love and have on playlists.
And there's a lot of songs on this album, so that's really impressive.
You know what I'm saying? So like if you can get a record that has, what is it? How many songs is this? 17 songs. 1, 2, 3, 4.
48, 20. Jeez.
Yeah. So there's 4 songs that I don't really, really love. Those would be Alien, Just For You, Need More, and Never Know. Like the second half of the album isn't as strong as the first half to me. But even those songs, I would still have them in like a on rotation somewhere. It wouldn't bother. It would.
Yeah,
I could listen to the LP front to back and not be bothered by any of it. It's fantastic.
And I pretty much I would say the Alien exception, that's about what the bottom tier of my list would be too on these songs, but they fit on the album perfect. It's not like you need to get past them to get to the good songs.
No, it's not a pain in the butt or anything.
As you are listening to it. I mean, I can't think of another album that's over the 40-minute mark that I don't automatically complain about how long it is. I'm stunned that this album is 48 minutes long, that I'm looking at that.
Oh, really?
It just doesn't feel like that to me.
That was my only issue with it while I was listening to it this week, was that it was a little bit long. But
and it is like objectively it is, and there's a mix of some shorter songs, and there's a 4-minute song in there, so it's kind of all over the place. But we've talked about it before, man. Sometimes these punk bands just put out everything they had every single time. They didn't really leave a ton of like developed stuff on the cutting floor, and so all these albums from the 90s have all this. I think it might have been too. I know like it wasn't a full thing. I think the capacity was up with the CDs too, of how much they can fit on there. So I wonder how much like that plays into it too with a lot of these late 90s stuff.
A CD was
so long.
I think a CD was like 90-minute capacity, or maybe it was 70 or something like that. It was over an hour, but
I want to say it was 70, and then it got moved up to 90. I think both those numbers are true. I think that's why you're saying that. But yeah, it was. I think it was longer than what a cassette.
No, cassettes could be like 120 minutes total.
No, I don't. Okay, maybe that's just my BS theory. I don't know, but it feels like a lot of these 90s punk albums have. We keep saying this. They have a lot of songs, and they're pretty long.
I think my theory is a little different. I think that back then, studio time was harder to come by.
Mm-hmm.
A release was more important back then. Like right now, you could drop 5 albums or 5 EPs or 5 singles or 6 singles in a year, no problem. Back then, it was not like that. If you had an album, it was important. It was coming out. That was a priority to you. So you didn't necessarily want to leave anything on the cutting room floor. So like that is got its pros and cons. But I think it's because back then, time in the studio wasn't as easy to get, and I think that getting a record out wasn't as easy back then.
Yeah, and you're right too. You couldn't monetize it the way you could now, where you could do a drop here, a drop there. The 7-inch release. I mean, you still can do those. You could have done those things, but it just wouldn't have had.
Well, yeah, nobody was buying singles like that back then. Those things didn't last. Like they weren't as popular. I have a couple because I'm a collector, but that's
and especially with this type of music, that didn't really exist as a thing. Like when I think of even singles that I had, they were singles of like pop songs that I got like at the Walmart for $4. That it was kind of like an accessible way to get a copy of this. And this is when I think of like Epitaph, and we talk about it all the time, like what is like the signature Epitaph band? Well, obviously it's kind of Bad Religion because they're inherent to that. But right after that, I might say Pennywise, as far as like that sound and stuff. And like when you think of like what Epitaph really like feels like and what they mean, I think of like skate punk, and I think of like Pennywise being the sort of anchor of that type of sound that they put out.
I would say Pennywise, and then like as like a 1A, I would have to put Rancid, but Rancid did Hellcat. And so for that reason, I would say Pennywise is probably correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Rancid too is it's a little bit of its own bean. So that's why they're slightly less associated maybe with Epitaph, even though like, them staying with Epitaph and all that is part of it. But I guess that's why I'm saying you almost say the ones that are true and associated are the ones that didn't get quite as big, because like that is what they have is being an Epitaph band, which they were all the way till 2008 when they had the chance to put out the album through the MySpace.
What are they doing now?
I thought they were back on Epitaph, or they're like quasi-independent. Let me look.
I was trying to look it up, but I wasn't seeing anything. But I'm also trying to make sure I don't miss something that you said.
Yeah, and I want to say, I know this is way off of what we're talking about. When they did the MySpace album, they still basically had a really good relationship with Epitaph, and I think Epitaph partially released it to him. MySpace just offered him a whole ton of money.
That has always been weird to me that they did something with MySpace,
as you might imagine. Yeah, and that was in like they came back to Epitaph for the last couple of albums. Yeah, that was in that era too, where MySpace was actually becoming nothing but a music site. So I think it kind of makes sense in a way, but Pennywise isn't exactly the demographic of what the MySpace music was. They're like a slight generation removed, but not the craziest thing in the world. I'll tell you what, Pennywise is a band, and this album in particular, that I would share with a lot of people that weren't necessarily like into punk. And Pennywise is not a band you would necessarily think of that would be like that, because they're such a punk band. They're such a skate punk band.
Dude,
But
I
skate
get
though, that's the thing.
okay.
The people that are into like a lot of the skate culture and stuff were really into Pennywise. Like that, they were into all kinds of types of
Oh,
rock,
dude, their
but
music's all over skate videos.
but they loved Pennywise, and a lot of
Yeah.
people. This album in particular, I just feel like I don't know if it was just where I was at and the time period and stuff, but a lot of people just loved these songs and were just really, really into Pennywise, and they're not people that were really into punk in any other way. I mean, they
Well,
didn't dislike punk, but that wasn't their thing.
that actually kind of leads into my point on this is that I
Mm.
get told frequently that Pennywise is like either a pop punk band or not punk rock. I don't really understand that. I do think they have a little bit more hardcore in their music than I initially thought. Like upon like deep dives, I hear a lot of hardcore riffs and stuff. Got a little bit of thrashy stuff in there, but they're like sonically speaking, they're a punk rock band.
I've always thought
They
with
have
them,
punk rock lyrics. They have punk rock. I don't get it. I don't
if
understand
you
it.
ask me what kind of music you like, I say punk rock. But then you ask me, well, what is punk rock? And if I had to just explain like what the sound is, I probably would put up Pennywise is a very good example of what punk rock kind of ideally in my brain always kind of sounds like. And I don't really get that as you're saying too, because like they're very similar to say like a band like NoFX, but a band like NoFX could much easier be considered like pop punk. I would say like the NoFXs and the Lagwagons and those kind of fat bands sound very similar to Pennywise, but they have like that sillier kind of jokey, more pop punky side to them. These guys are more. They're also a lot like say like a Bad Religion or one of those, but they don't have like the rock side necessarily, the rock and roll side that Bad Religion brings into that. They are very much. They're very much what they are. These kids who were just slightly younger than the Black Flags and the Circle Jerks and all that. They were kind of
Right.
like teenagers in that scene who, also come up through the 90s and refine that sound. It's more of that. It's very similar to the Offspring. It's that 80s sound brought up with like that the 90s culture and technology kind of mixed into it. They just don't deviate much from what they do. That is sort of their calling card. Is there is a certain quality standard that they have, and again, I don't know what other genre. I understand pop punk in that it was popular punk and it was in video games, but as far
Yeah.
as pop punk, I don't like. I could make that case for a lot of other bands that are closer to them than I ever
Right.
really would to Pennywise. And at the same time, like yeah, punk unless skate punk can't be punk, then I don't know how you would define Pennywise. Like that's
Yeah. I think
yeah.
people like to just gatekeep, myself included. I've been guilty of it. I'm not.
Yeah,
I've been trying to be as self-aware as I can lately. I've been trying to like.
Pennywise has their haters though. We should
Yeah.
say that they like for a band that doesn't really deserve it. Like you could say like there's no effects haters, but like that kind of makes sense. Like you kind of get why there could be no effects haters. Pennywise has like people
Well, yeah,
seem to have
Fat Mike's
problems
a
with.
dick.
Yeah, so it makes sense. Pennywise, I think people who don't like their music just don't like everything about them. They don't like their fans. They don't like that. They're just kind of that kind of thing that I do like sort of hear in the discourse a little bit. But also Pennywise also has very dedicated, as I said, specific fans that are only fans of them, or people who just love Pennywise like you and I do and like kind of swear by Pennywise as just one of the bands that's a stalwart. If you if you like this stuff that we like they're such a cornerstone band. You and I think both had them on our top 10 bands list. Every time we did an instrument ranking, we had one of the members of the band sort of on our
Dude.
top 10s. They're really, really, I mean, good and important. Whatever you
How
want to
you
say.
could say-
and punk more than anything is just God. They're punk.
Yes, and I'm sorry for cutting you off. How you could say you're a fan of punk rock music and then not like Pennywise, I genuinely don't understand it because their recording quality is good. The vocals are good. You can hear what he's saying. The lyrics are good. They're political without being pretentious. They're important. They're evergreen. They're always relevant. The guitar playing is pretty great. The only thing that I wish they had was some solos in their music, but it doesn't matter enough to make me not want to like jam it all the time. But dude, they really are a top band for me. And it's funny because I've had people. Okay, I'm not gonna say who it was because not that they're even listening at this point. They probably aren't. But like, I had a person say that Pennywise was not real punk. It was just a bunch of bros. Like, what do they call? I think they call them jocks. And then like a week or two later, I did another video, and the guy was like, "Look at these fashion punk posers," and I was like, "All right, bro. If Pennywise isn't punk because they're jocks and they're wearing, hats that you and I would wear and Dickie shorts and Vans, these guys aren't punk because they're fashion punk posers because they have mohawks instead of jackets.
Which one is it? Yeah.
Well, so is only the crusty, poor street kids that wear nothing but faded black shirts and disgusting pants? That's what the only people that are punk to you? It's so frustrating to me. Which it shouldn't matter. I shouldn't care at all. But it does
No,
bother me.
but that one's, and that's what I said. You're referring to the exact criticism I always hear, that they're like a jock band or they're like a
Yeah.
bro-y band, and it's
Yeah.
well, okay, they do have the song "Bro Him." Yes, they
Yeah,
do
but that
that.
means
And,
brother, not bro.
yeah, and
like,
a lot of like I have a note in there. It's very much sweaty men music. Is very much what Pennywise is.
I mean, it really is.
So there is that, and I think they are embraced by, again, other parts of like culture, like
Well, skate culture and like X Games culture is
surf
got
culture.
a little.
Yeah, they were in a lot of those
the,
surf videos. They're always in. They were always in the Tony Hawk games. They're always in even the other sports games that would license music. Brett was really good about always getting those guys onto those games. You hear their music sometimes at like football games and stuff. So it does fit. They're a very like intense, kind of high testosterone type of band like that, but they're not like, are you listening to these lyrics and stuff if you're going to call them like a bro-y jock band? Like, the two things don't really go together once you actually dive into this band.
The other band that falls into that is Hatebreed.
Mm-hmm.
Those two bands are like the separation between like jocks and punks. It's Hatebreed and Pennywise. So Hatebreed for hardcore, obviously, Pennywise for punk rock. And it's because in any kind of gym where there's weightlifting, you might hear some Pennywise, you might hear some Hatebreed. But any like street kid punk rocker might be jamming some Hatebreed, might be jamming some Pennywise because the lyrics. So the sound is it's this weird connection between those two worlds. And when you go to shows, that's where you get shit like violence, because you have these two different cultures that just clash, and it's wild, man. I've seen it happen many times. Honestly, more with the Hatebreed crowd than the Pennywise crowd. But
and we should also note too, with Pennywise, we've talked about it before, and they've talked about it. The whole thing about the fashion and all that, which you and I both very much are descendants of Pennywise fashion, even on and off screen when we have spoken to each other. But like they've always said, them and Bad Religion and Lagwag, they're from California. So it's just it's more of that they are the style of the area. You're not really done up. You're going surfing all the time. You're skating. You're kind of
I mean,
it's just kind of it was just part of that kind of culture. Wasn't as like it was less about the fashion in that way than London and New York and some of these other scenes, or even LA, which is more of like this still this late night club kind of party, whereas like, again, I still think of like that 80s punk, that stuff's happening at like Whiskey A Go-Go. And I think of Pennywise happening in like an afternoon on a really hot day in someone's like backyard. And that's kind of the vibe of that style of
at like a barbecue with a skate ramp in the back.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a fever dream that I have all the time.
It's a California thing, man. They're very California.
And their music sounds like it too. Like some of these songs, like I was gonna say, like Victim of Reality, just it sounds like a song for cruising down like an LA highway, and you could see some dude. Again, I'm fitting into the stereotype, like some bro with Oakleys, I guess, kind of sitting in there. But it has that kind of, it's got that kind of vibe. But as you said, is a little bit deeper than that, in a band that definitely espouses a completely different message. Like again, their biggest song on this album, the hit is Alien, a song about alienation, about being different, about not fitting into society and creating your own way. And it's a very different spirit than a jockey bro-y kind of band.
California has a few of those bands though. I mean, think about it. You have like Sublime, very much like a California band that if that band was in New York, they wouldn't have ever gotten big, I don't think.
Well, I think Pennywise's like spirit sister, The Offspring, is very much like that too. Like The Offspring are extremely California.
People get so mad when we compare those two bands, but they sound so similar.
I have in my notes here, like Straight Ahead is kind of very similar to Smash. It's got a lot of the parts of Smash and a lot of that mid-90s Offspring, and then even the song Straight Ahead. Listen to the music in it, and it sounds like Come Out and Play. Do 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 do. You're straight ahead. It's your fucking life. I mean, I can do a great job of humming it, but it's got that same kind of thing. We've talked about it. I mean, Noodles and Fletcher sounds so similar. Noodles does more
That I
things, and
agree with.
he adds a little bit more flair and fills and all that. But if you scale back a lot of what Noodles does, it's a lot of it sounds a lot like Fletcher. And we talked about band size, and I've always thought this is pretty important with Pennywise. They're a 4-piece, but only 3 of them
Yeah.
play instruments. So you got the drummer. You have 2 bass players. Now, like this album starts out on Greed and some of these songs with those big bass intros. And it's crazy because they lost their bass player, took his own life a couple of years before this album came out. And Randy, Bradbury steps in and really does honor to, the guy who wrote Bro Him and wrote the bass line of Bro Him. And you see some of these songs and they're really carried by that. And then Fletcher, like the whole thing, as you said, there's no solos. I assume Fletcher probably doesn't have the capability. He strikes me as just that sort of like power chord rhythm guitarist that can play anything.
I would be fairly surprised if he could just shred.
I think he's very much in that Johnny Ramone tradition where he kind of learned how to do those things. He's got tons of charisma. I think he's a part of their songwriting, definitely a part of their persona. And then Jim, I always wonder, is Jim actually like a good singer? I know these songs are great and he fits the songs great.
Okay.
And he does I've checked out his solo stuff and it's okay, but I've always wondered like, because most of these guys that are frontmen, I generally think could have been like solo artists, like in their own thing. Like they were good and they could have found other things. I don't know about Jim. If I would have really taken,
I've never listened to his solo material. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's I've listened to a little bit, and it's like I don't judge that necessarily because it's like that singer songwriter kind of acoustic stuff, so it's pretty good for what it is. You know what I mean? But and you can hear what he's like in a slower register because it happens on some Pennywise songs. But I think his voice, I've always wondered, like, does it only fit these Pennywise songs, or would he be a good guy? I remember like in the F Word documentary, whenever he leaves Pennywise and he talks about like, well, I could do soundtrack stuff and other vocal stuff, and I'm like, can Jim actually sing? I don't even mean that as like a derogatory thing. I just can't like kind of disassociate him from these songs and wonder like if that's why that works. Again, it kind of feels like a weird point because I'm not trying to bury him in any way. I'm saying that like he fits these songs so perfect because he's such a key part of that kind of deep voice he has. He's very authoritative in the way he talks, where he's both like this.
Oh, you think
like,
he's got a deep voice?
Like the rasp, like the
okay.
Yeah.
So like gravelly kind of.
Gravelly, like it's funny that he has the reputation of the punk rock dad. I've always thought he had like just a grown man voice, especially like those mid albums. The early album, he's a little kind of high pitchy, and even on like Victim of Reality, but for the most part, he always sounds like a grown man to me. The way that
okay, that I agree with, but he's always got like a mid range vocal to me. I don't think he's ever sounded deep or high on his vocal like. I guess
that's a better way to say it. Like, I don't know what the musical term is for grown man voice, but whatever it is,
it's like a mid range vocal.
Yeah, and he doesn't like always sing super fast either. It's not like last week we were talking about AFI and Davey's doing this, and it's a little more in and out, especially on this album, as I mentioned earlier. Whatever he's going in and out and creating these real chanty kind of songs. Like they're part of why I said like this. We criticize artists today that they're making songs for TikTok and they're making songs that are 30 seconds and all this stuff.
We do criticize that a lot.
And I'm going to criticize Pennywise again for making songs that are just meant to be enjoyed in 110-degree summer festivals with a bunch of other sweaty dudes on the side of you.
Let's hear it for sweaty dudes.
Singing, it's all greed, or, government, and people just singing along every single word of every one of those songs.
They're anthemic.
Yeah, it's like this kind of like choral feature that it's got to them, and it's like, again, think about the Pennywise fans. They're such a big part of the band. Is that Pennywise fan? That's part of it. Is like it's it's this musical thing where you're into the songs and they're generally performed very well. They have this intense energy. There's a pacing to them. It feels like I don't know. Again, like I just equate Pennywise to like hard work and a hot day. It's just kind of what like that crappy feeling of those kind of like just getting through that. I think a lot of us have got through a lot of hard work and hot days listening to like a lot of Pennywise.
Oh, we really have
that type of music. No, I mean I could go on and on about this band in particular, but this album I think they really. They hit a stride here, and it's not like the other albums didn't around this time. I just happen to really like these songs that were on this album in particular. And again, I think they have just enough melody. I think is exactly the key. They hit just enough melody to make them catchy, but they're fun and heavy enough and intense enough to really make you feel like you're exhausted by the end of one of these shows or one of these albums.
One of the things about Pennywise is that they are catchy. They are melodic. It is music that'll get stuck in your head. But the lyrical content, I think they're a really great entryway punk band for a number of reasons, but they're also a band that a lot of the longtime punk rockers like. They're really, what's the word I'm looking for here, man? Like they're
accessible or universal.
Excuse me, like malleable. Like they can fit a bunch of different molds. You know what I'm saying? So like, if you have some kid who's like riding a BMX bike and he's like, man, what kind of music do you like? Man, I like your jacket, dude. And he sees like my Grimple patch. I could get him to Grimple through Pennywise, or NoFX even. You know what I'm saying? Like stuff like that. But the lyrical content, once you scratch the surface and you go beneath the first couple of layers, you get into some really deep content. They have lyrics about addiction, abuse, political stuff. And like I said earlier, their music's kind of evergreen. Their political topics are usually stuff that are important or relevant all the time. You know, they're talking about, instead of talking about George Bush, they're just talking about how we're getting screwed over by our lawmakers. And you know what I'm saying?
Well, so, I wanted to say something really quick on that because I've been thinking about that a lot this week.
Absolutely not, Rob. We're not doing it tonight, buddy.
We're not letting you go on these long diatribes.
We're not. Yeah.
I'm
not going to sit here for 15 minutes and not say anything.
Yikes. Okay, so I've done a lot of research on this over the years, so I'm not just pulling this out of my head, but okay, so in American punk rock, as far as authority figures, there has been two central villains. And that is, of course, the goat of the villain of American punk rock, which would be Ronald Reagan. The second one is George W. Bush. Those guys made really, really good villains. Like it's just a good and Reagan penetrated all of you can argue a lot, basically all of 80s rock of almost every form was like a rock against Reagan. Now it took a little bit longer with Bush to become as polarized as he did, but once he did, it was really easy again for Green Day and these guys to kind of make these epic albums. Now, it's not just a left-right thing, because it also happened in the case of George H.W. Bush as well.
Yeah.
Once you didn't have those guys in power, some people just kind of turn off their brain automatically when there's just not the villain there. And other people, I think, it's hard because we live in this stupid duopoly where it's like, okay, right. I'm not going to vote for the psychos over here. I'm going to vote for this piece of crap over here. It's kind of like our American
that's
thing.
Kind of the problem is that it's
right. It's a limited amount of choice. It's an extremely limited one that other democracies, quite frankly, don't even do because they tend to have more options. My point to all that is I think it's a little harder to the Rock against Clinton thing didn't really work as well. It just didn't have the same sort of resonance. Not to say that people weren't pissed off. And in fact, Clinton was such a polarizing president. I think people forget that he just got transferred as just another authority figure. There just wasn't at least on the more California liberal side of things, there wasn't that specific anger towards him, the way that started developing in the South, because they already had that history with them. And then everything got really polarized. So I say all that to say that what these bands did is they sort of take that thing of this sort of end of history thing that a lot of media had in the late 90s is we've basically solved the world and here's where we are. That was kind of that whole end of history thing you have in the 90s. And I think punk has a little bit of that too. But what these 90s punk bands do, it's almost like every one of these songs, and it's even Green Day has it, The Offspring has it, Rancid has it. It's kind of like an episode of Cops almost, or it's almost like this reality show of, okay, our society's cool. We did everything. We won everything. We defeated communism, yada, yada, yada. And it still sucks. And everything still sucks. And look how crappy this works. And a lot of this stuff is about more local injustice than national injustice. You think a lot of songs in the 90s about, police reform and state violence like that. And so it's less of this big sort of monster Darth Vader, the way Reagan and Bush are, and more of just the whole of society. Look at what we have become. Is more of the
there's a disgust in our culture in our Western culture. It's now look, I don't find the same amount of disgust in it that some people do,
right?
But I'm realistic. I know that we are far from a perfect place. I think that there's a lot of nastiness that goes on here, but I'm also grateful for the freedoms that we've got and that we're able to even talk about it, right? But when you don't have a super polarizing figure to point at and like attack, I think specifically political punk starts to get a little watered down.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit
well, and that's part of why
complacent.
the more like party level punk took over. I think in the '90s, like that was part of it because you didn't really know who to be mad at in the '90s or necessarily if you should be mad because
Facts.
there is all this like now we live in like the worst of both worlds where everyone's mad and we're mad at our technology and we're mad at our technology made us like really much we very much now
I mean,
in this
you're
time
not
period
wrong.
we live in the hangover of this and that's like this and there's a lot of like bad religion. A lot of it is really coming to terms with like the technical world. And I always say it's a lot of it. It almost looks like like your TV set in the evening, especially in the '90s. Like now we watch like reality TV or we like to escape into other stuff or we watch people and the '90s is the start of like reality TV, but it's also like trash TV. Like we loved seeing like human decline. Like that was really something we like seeing. You have, Access Hollywood and Inside Edition, all these scandalous like all of that.
And then you have like Maury Povich and
yeah. We were really into. I think we got a little more entertainment out of maybe if we felt better about ourselves or what it was. And we still do the same thing with social media nowadays. But
I was gonna say that
those same people also have like this whole army of fans of Defenders and stuff. Whereas like in the '90s, it just felt like every Sunday night after The Simpsons or whatever, Cops would be on, and everyone is just watching that. And this is the era of OJ and high speed chase. I think television is really what it is. It's the '90s is really the first time with cable television that like the country is really seeing each other. Now we see each other all the time, and we don't want to see each other. We're all pretty ugly.
That's the benefit, or not the benefit, but that's one of the things about social media is that the internet, we do see everything. We do have everybody, each other. It's all in our face. There's no veil there anymore. There is no curtain to look behind. The curtain to look behind, that's long gone, man. I was watching Phil Donahue earlier today.
Speaking of the 90s.
I think it was even 80s episodes I was watching. One was like Parents of Punkers, and then one was like
it's infamous. Yeah, they're in like Chicago. Yeah.
And then I watched the one with the New York hardcore scene, and I was just like, man, this stuff is wild, dude.
There's so many guys too in those crowds that if you look in the comments, they're like, there's so and so that ended up being in this band or that that's No, it's funny to think of that too. As like in the '80s, it was like punk is this social ill. I think we're over that in the '90s, but the cultural commentary, I guess it's more cultural than political commentary. I would say in the '90s, and it kind of merges back into that with the W. Bush administration in the
always
2000s.
Going to be something political to talk about, always, because the world's a disgusting, dark place, man. Not a lot we can do about that at the moment. But it is there's always going to be political punk rock. This band is far more literate on that field or in that spectrum than you might think, based on especially like their like the shenanigans that Fletcher gets up to and the stuff that the way that Jim looks, he just doesn't look like the kind of guy that would necessarily care about that stuff.
And it's funny because he's an educated dude. He's written books. Like he actually,
and that is kind of crazy.
He's
bro.
not that much different.
Smarter than you would think.
Like
just by looking at him.
Last time I said, and it's kind of funny that like Pennywise is like Bad Religion's juvenile delinquent little brother.
I mean,
which is true, but they're also like clearly from the same family, and you have like these really intelligent people at the top because at the same time, all of these songs, like the thing that he studied, I think was like spiritualism and individuality. So that actually makes sense of songs like My Own Way and Victim of Reality, and Badge of Pride. It is. And I think it goes on to our other discussion of instead of like, unfortunately, it's a little more atomized. It's a little less of we the people, I guess, the way that you would maybe in the 80s or the 2000s, where it's like I am stuck in this bubble of society. How do I achieve this sort of personal freedom? So it might be a little less collective, but also might be just the way Jim thinks about things and thinks about the world.
I think that he's much smarter than people give him credit for.
Yeah, no.
People like to like crap on people on every. We all do it. I think I've done it.
Yeah,
I
it's probably Fletcher's fault. Let's be honest. It's probably Fletcher's fault that it's he's thought of it
everything's
that way.
Fletcher's fault.
Most things is generally like if you're at a party and stuff is going wrong, it's probably Fletcher's fault.
You're not wrong there, man. That guy. I want to party with that dude so bad.
I do too
I
with
don't
like
know that it would be.
an
Sorry, I'm
immunity
looking
of
for something to tell you about. I can't find it, so I want to put
No,
the
I
stupid
do
thing
want to.
down.
I want the skin on the wall of having partied with Fletcher. I don't know. I had like a few shots of vodka the other night, and I was like sick for 2 days. I don't know if I necessarily want the everything else that's gonna come along. And by the way, all these guys, they got all these health issues, all this stuff. You get the feeling that Fletcher is like healthy as a horse here. He's just ticking along, man.
It's because he drinks so much, huh?
It is like like there's like 10 drunks in the world, so I'm not recommending this to anyone, but they like pickle themselves and preserve themselves, like they ferment themselves. And
With
as long as,
vodka and tequila.
yeah, Fletcher just can't stop drinking. If he stops drinking, the insides will fall out. So we got
Yeah, I mean that might actually be true. You know, at the remember at the Punk Rock Museum they had the Fletcher, and you got like a
the
Pringles can dumped into the plate, and then that thing was full of beer.
Which apparently he really does. I love the story in the Epitaph documentary that they celebrated some album release, and Fletcher's way of celebrating it was lighting the entire bar on fire and then going on the roof, and then there's the biggest
Good
night
grief.
like Epitaph, and like it ended with police helicopters getting Fletcher off the roof of some bar.
That's insane.
and so going forward with the band, it's kind of funny with the two members, whereas Jim is this guy that's branded himself as the punk rock dad. He's got the 3 kids and all of this,
Right.
and then he's right next
His
to
wife
Fletcher.
is so normal looking. I feel bad for her sometimes.
Yeah, and then he's right next to Fletcher, who is just this eternal party. Like it's not surprising at all that Fletcher and Fat Mike are such good friends. But I know
for
Fletcher's
real.
like the mature one of that group. Although
Wow.
still, like I think mature in the fact that like if we were all hanging out, like Fletcher wouldn't say as many things to piss you off. But if we were all hanging out, Fletcher's also more likely to have like broken your couch because he did like a
terrible.
flip off your counter.
That is terrible news.
Yeah, I just want to hang out with Fletcher now. What the hell? That was the whole point of that
Dude,
conversation.
I definitely want to hang out with Fletcher. That guy seems awesome.
Another I think probably underrated intelligent dude too, because every time I hear him speak about pretty much anything, he knows what the heck he's talking about. I think he's a
Yeah.
pretty crucial
Is he a low key nerd kind of?
Yeah, I don't think he's necessarily educated in the way that like Fat Mike and these guys and Jim and these guys kind of are, but he definitely he understands music when he talks about it and some of the parts
Okay.
of that. And then he was always a guy that I think was hanging out with Jay Bentley and everyone else at the Epitaph office and learning how to like move stuff around it. Fletcher's probably a guy that you just like, he's that buddy that kind of just never goes away when you hang around him, so you're always just kind of doing the thing, man.
That's probably me too.
Yeah,
degree.
you would probably fit that, where you're just always sort of like whatever we're doing, you're coming with us and you're doing that.
Man, I do kind of want to go hang out with Fletcher. I want to meet. There's a lot of punk rock dudes that are guys that you and I look up to that I would love to hang out with just for a little while, man, and just get to know them. There's a lot of great people in this scene. There's a lot of crappy people everywhere. You can't escape that. But in the punk rock, man, I think there's just a ton of like really great people that are far deeper than we realize on the surface. Because I mean, think about it. I would say that even you and I qualify for this. On the surface, we might seem a certain way, but once you get to know us, we're different people. I would say that I'm specifically like that. I have a lot of problems with like my communication. I don't know how to I get angry really quick. I have anger issues, but I also always sound abrasive and angry when I'm not. And I think that I don't know where I'm going off on this tangent, but
it kind of describes like a band like Pennywise, though, that always does sound kind of angry and abrasive. And as you said, once you start getting into these songs, they're pretty deep. They're pretty introspective. They have a lot of. It's not just the cliche of like the punk rockers shaking their fist at society. There's plenty of that, but again, and there's even uplifting songs in this, like was still
They've
still
got
Can't Breathe
they've got some of
Great,
that in all their
and
music though, don't they?
and like every album has like one or two of this, and I think most great punk albums actually have like that one sort of like uplifting song in the midst of a lot of their critique. You know, this album I'm looking at, because I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page. I heard a lot of these songs initially. I had this album early on, but I always say I had Live at the Key Club. That was the first Pennywise album I had, which had a lot of these songs. It was that live album. And then I got this one shortly after. And I used to fall asleep a lot with this album. I had one of those like 5 CD changers. And for whatever reason, this album just like got in that, it never made it to like my truck. And so late at night, you'd be laying. And so you kids these days are on your TikToks and stuff, falling asleep with your videos on repeat. We used to go with 6 CD changers with the thing just blasting in your head, as if that's a good way to, you know, like fall asleep and stuff. And you're just listening to Land of the Free right there.
I used to have headphones that were very similar to this, and I would fall asleep like this all the time. I should be able to hear you still, I think. Yeah, they're plugged in. Okay. Yeah. And I would just be like, I fall asleep like this. I bought these for Parker. He's my co-host during the week now.
Oh, nice.
He sits in his little chair next to me, and he puts these on, and he listens to music with me. And him being 3, it's very entertaining. I mean, he's still a 3-year-old, so it's kind of a pain in the butt. But I'm on dad duty during the week, so nothing I can do about it. Nor would I want to, man. It's awesome. I have a great life. What am I talking about? But I have like the over-the-ear, like, but they were the ones with the foam, though. They were about the same size, but they had like the foam,
circles, like flat,
and it had like a
circles,
Discman, and it had a button you could hit, and the button would be repeat. So you do it, and I would waste my whole batteries, just fall asleep, listening to Out Come the Wolves, listening to. So you mentioned that Live at the Key Club was your first Pennywise record. My parallel to that would be that my first Bad Religion record was All Ages, and I think that those are great examples of entry point punk band records. You know what I'm saying? You can, hey, get to know Pennywise with this one. Hey, get to know about I Heard They Suck Live was my first NoFX album. I don't think Rancid has one, do they?
No, and they don't really have like a greatest hits either. Like
they've got Live on a Drive, which is a bootleg, but it is a live album and it's really good.
I'm looking at Live at the Key Club. They actually like have like almost no songs straight ahead on there. That's my brain. That was my brain merging those two, because I had them about similar times. I mean, they were released a year apart, so they're kind of.
So, Live at the Key Club is a year apart from Straight Ahead. What year before, a year after?
It was a year after. It was in 2000. So pretty good run they had, though. They had Straight Ahead, then they had Live at the Key Club, and then Land of the Free came out in 01. So that was
Land of the Free is the one that I really like.
Yeah, that's
as if I don't like the other records.
That's a heavy contender for number 1 on my list and number 1 on, I think, most people's list. After 2003, From Ashes is still very good. They just like Fletcher tried playing guitar for a few albums, and that was like not the greatest of decisions. I thought, at least.
I like From the Ashes a lot, actually.
That's good. I just generally think their 90s stuff is just a hair better than that. But
okay, I mean, again, I kind of lump it in with the same stuff.
Yeah, it's not that different. I just generally draw a line right at that album with some of that stuff. Again, Pennywise releases pretty much really good albums for about 30 years now, so it's.
I mean, everything that they put out is very high quality, in my opinion.